On May 12, 2025, at 6:14 p.m., the heat index in Little Havana reached 98 degrees. Inside a small bungalow on Southwest 14th Avenue, the air conditioning was struggling against the humidity. A woman named Alina, age 58, was sitting on a sofa. Her heart rate was resting at 72 beats per minute. Her blood pressure was 120/80. According to the medical telemetry recorded later that night, there was no warning, no stutter in the rhythm, no gradual decline. At 6:15 p.m., the electrical signal in her heart simply vanished. The technical term is sudden cardiac arrest. The heart does not stop beating. It stops vibrating. It goes still. In the 3 seconds it took for her chin to hit her chest, Elena had already left the room. I have spent 40 years looking at the world through a needle's eye. You understand? When you spend your life as a costurera, you don't see clothes. You see construction. You see where the tension is too high in the shoulder. You see the cheap thread a factory used to save 10 cents on a hem. My hands, look at them, they are hard at the tips. The calluses from 1,000 pinpricks. That is my life. Seams, hidden knots, making sure the outside looks smooth even if the inside is a mess of raw edges. It was Sunday. My daughter Luz was over. My husband Mateo had made coffee, the strong kind, the cafecito that stays in the back of your throat. We were sitting on the plastic-covered sofa. The heat was heavy, like a wet wool blanket over the city. We had the family album out, the big one with the peeling gold letters. I was looking at a photo of my mother from 1984. She was standing in front of a mango tree. I was thinking about her dress. It was a simple cotton poplin. I remember thinking I should have used a tighter stitch on that collar. That was my last thought, a critique of a stitch from 40 years ago. Then something snapped. It wasn't a bone. It was like a bobbin running out of thread in the middle of a high-speed line. You know that sound? That sudden empty whirring when the resistance disappears? The machine is still moving, but nothing is being held together anymore. I didn't fall. I didn't go into a tunnel. I didn't see a light. I was behind the world. Imagine you are a tiny ant crawling on a piece of embroidery. All you see are giant, messy knots, long, loose threads of blue and red crossing over each other. It looks like a disaster. It looks like chaos. You think to yourself, whoever made this was a fool. There is no plan here. It's just a tangle. That is how I saw my life. For 58 years, I was looking at the back of the fabric. I saw the debt we couldn't pay in 1998. I saw the way Mateo looked at me when he lost his job at the warehouse. I saw the age spots on my hands and the way my knees felt like they were full of broken glass every morning. I saw the knots, the ugly parts. I thought that was the whole story. I thought aging was just the fabric getting thin, the thread fraying until it breaks. But then the perspective shifted. It didn't move. I moved. I was pulled above the embroidery, and I saw the other side, the right side, Luz, Mateo, the coffee, the mango tree, the struggle. The knots I thought were mistakes, they were the only things holding the pattern together. From the other side, the colors weren't just colors. They were, I don't have the word, not bright. They were heavy with meaning. A deep, resonant crimson for the years I spent waking up at 4 a.m. to finish the bridesmaid dresses. A shimmering silver for the nights I prayed over Luz when she had the fever. I saw the pattern. It was a garment. A beautiful, finished piece of work. And I wasn't just a thread in it. I was the one wearing it. I tried to tell Mateo. I could see him. I could see him reaching for me. His face was starting to break. He was dropping his coffee cup. I saw the brown liquid suspended in the air, like beads on a string. But I couldn't speak because my mouth was full of something that felt like cool water. I wasn't afraid. How can you be afraid when you finally see that the seam is straight? I kept thinking, look at the tension. It's perfect. Every hard year was just a different color of thread. Clinical studies involving electroencephalogram, EEG, monitoring of patients during cardiac arrest have identified a specific surge in gamma wave activity that occurs within 30 seconds of the heart stopping. Research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences suggests these waves are associated with high-level cognitive processing and memory recall. While the physical body enters a state of total stasis, the brain's internal electrical environment becomes more organized, not less. Elena's perception of a perfect pattern, aligns with this documented neurological spike, a moment where the brain appears to be synthesizing a lifetime of data into a single coherent structure at the exact threshold of clinical death. But then the room, my living room, the smell of the coffee, it started to pull away, like a piece of lace being ripped off a bodice. I wasn't in the bungalow anymore. I was in a space that felt like a workshop, but it was infinite. The air didn't smell like Miami humidity. It smelled like cedar blocks and fresh linen. Clean. I saw people, but they weren't walking. They were part of the architecture. I saw my mother, Abuela Rosa. She looked the way she did in the photo I was just holding, but without the weight of the years. She wasn't younger exactly. That's not it. She was complete. In my shop, when a customer comes in for a fitting, I have to pin the dress to their body. I have to adjust for the way they slouch or the way one shoulder is higher than the other. We spend our lives trying to fit into a world that wasn't cut for us. We hem ourselves in. We take ourselves in at the waist. We try to hide the parts of us that don't match the pattern the world wants. My mother looked at me, and she didn't see my 58 years as a burden. She looked at me the way a master tailor looks at a bolt of expensive silk. With a kind of reverence, she said, "Elena, look at what you've carried." And I looked down at myself. I wasn't wearing my old housecoat. I was covered in what looked like every hour I had ever lived. It was heavy, but it wasn't the weight of a stone. It was the weight of a heavy winter coat that keeps you safe from the wind. It was a density of experience. She told me that on Earth, we think we are losing our beauty as we get older. We think the wrinkles are just tears in the cloth. But here, I saw that the wrinkles were actually the most intricate part of the embroidery. They were the places where the thread had been doubled back, the places where the fabric was strongest. Elena is experiencing what psychologists call domain-specific cognitive anchoring. Because her identity is so deeply intertwined with her labor, her mind refuses to process the afterlife through abstract spiritual concepts. Instead, she reaches for the professional lens of the seamstress to survive the sensory overload. By framing the other side as a workshop and her life as a garment, she maintains a sense of agency. However, there is a visible fracture in her narrative. She describes her mother as complete, yet her urgent tone suggests she is still trying to reconcile this perfection with the raw, unfinished reality of the living room she just left behind. The professional instinct to fix the seam is currently at war with the spiritual reality of a pattern that is already finished. I wanted to stay. I wanted to sit with her and talk about the stitches. But then I noticed the shadows. They weren't at the center. They were at the edges of the room. The workshop was vast, but there were corners where the light didn't go. And in those corners, I saw things that made my skin crawl. They looked like tangled nests of black thread, sharp, like thorns. They were moving. They were pulling at the hems of the people who were arriving. I saw a man nearby. He looked like he had just come from a hospital bed. He was covered in a garment of his life, just like me. But his was full of holes. Not because he hadn't lived, but because he was trying to pull the threads out himself. He was looking at his past with such shame. He was trying to unsew the parts he didn't like. And these shadows, these things in the corners, they were helping him. They were whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the vibration. It was the sound of a seam ripping. I realized then that there is a force that wants us to believe our lives are garbage. It wants us to think that the mistakes we made have ruined the whole piece. It wants us to keep pulling at the loose threads until there's nothing left but a pile of scrap. I reached out to my mother. I said, "Mama, help him." But she just looked at me with those eyes. They were so steady. She said, "Elena, he has to decide if he wants to be whole. You cannot sew for someone else." That is when I felt it. A presence, not a shadow, not a person. It was the one who owns the workshop. The air in the room changed. It became dense, like the moment before a massive thunderstorm hits the Everglades. The tension in the atmosphere was so high, I thought I would burst. I turned around, and that is when I saw him. Elena uses the Spanish concept of descoser, literally to unsew, to describe the man's struggle. The root of the word sew comes from the Proto-Indo-European sew, meaning to bind or join together. In its oldest context, this wasn't just about fabric. It was about the binding of a wound or the joining of a soul to a body. When Elena describes the shadows helping the man unsew his life, she is describing a literal decreation. The ancient meaning suggests that to unsew is not just to ruin a garment, but to unbind the very essence that holds a human being in existence. The shadows aren't just destroying his past. They are attempting to dissolve his reality by attacking the joins of his endurance. He didn't look like the pictures on the candles. He didn't look like a king in a palace. He looked like the master. He was wearing a simple tunic, but the weave of it was impossible. It looked like it was made of light and time and water all at once. He was standing over a table, and on that table was the album. My family album, the one with the peeling gold letters. He was turning the pages. I walked toward him. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through deep wool. I was 58 years old, but I felt like a child who had just walked into her father's workroom after making a mess. I looked at my hands. They were stained with the black thread from the shadows. I had tried to help that man, and now I was carrying his shame on my skin. I stopped. I couldn't go closer. I thought, I am not finished. My seams are crooked. I haven't done enough. Jesucristo looked up from the album. He didn't say my name with his mouth. He said it with the light. He said, Elena, why are you trying to hide the underside? I looked down. I was trying to pull my sleeves over my hands. I was trying to cover the knots, the parts of my life that I thought were ugly, the years of struggle, the arguments with Mateo, the times I felt small and useless in that little house in Miami. He stepped toward me, and when he moved, the shadows in the corners, they didn't just run, they vanished. They couldn't exist in the same space as the tension he carried. He took my hands in his. His skin was rough, like mine. He had the calluses of a worker. He had the scars of someone who knows what it means to be pierced. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the garment I was wearing. He ran his fingers over the wrinkles, over the rough patches, over the places where I had suffered. And then he did something I will never forget. He smiled. Not a polite smile. A smile of triumph. Like a tailor who has just finished the most difficult commission of his life and knows it is perfect. He said, You think these are flaws, Elena? These are the points of strength. This is where the weave is tightest. I looked at the album on the table. It was open to a page that was blank. It was the future, the years I hadn't lived yet, and I saw something there that made me gasp. A thread, a single, bright blue thread that was waiting to be pulled through the needle. I'm not finished, I whispered. He looked at me, and the love, it wasn't a feeling, it was a weight. It was so heavy I couldn't breathe. The pattern requires the final color, he said. And then he reached out and touched the center of my chest. The touch, it didn't feel like skin on skin. It felt like a needle passing through a heavy winter coat. You know that resistance? That little pop when the point clears the lining? That was my heart. It was like he was re-threading me, pulling the line back through the eye so the machine could start again. But I wasn't back in Miami yet. The workshop, it opened up. I told you about the shadows, the ones I call the shadow stitchers. They were in the corners, lurking like grease stains on a white silk dress. But now, as he touched me, I saw the ones who were actually holding the room together. I call them the bright ones. They weren't floating. They weren't playing harps. They were working. They looked like columns of living heat, like the air above the pavement in Little Havana when the sun is at its peak. They were standing at these massive, invisible frames, looms that went up into a ceiling I couldn't see, and they were holding the tension. That is the secret of the whole world. Tension. If the thread is too loose, the garment has no shape. If it's too tight, it snaps. These beings, these bright ones, they were leaning their whole weight against the threads of every life being lived. I saw them holding on to Mateo. I saw them holding on to Luz. One of them looked at me. It didn't have a face like yours or mine. It had a face made of purpose. It was like looking into the sun through a piece of smoked glass. It said, Do not let the shadows pull the hem. I looked back at the man I had seen before, the one who was trying to unsew his own life because he was ashamed. The shadow stitchers were all over him now. They looked like black, oily smoke, and they were whispering into his ears, telling him that his 50 years were a waste, that the holes in his character couldn't be mended. They were trying to get him to let go of the thread. because if he let go, the whole piece would unravel into nothing. I felt this heat in my chest where the master had touched me. It was like a steam iron had been pressed against my soul, smoothing out the wrinkles of my fear. I screamed at the man, "Don't let them! It's the underside, you're only looking at the knots." He couldn't hear me, but the master, he didn't move. He just watched. He wasn't being cruel. He was like a teacher watching a student finally try to solve the problem. He wanted that man to see what I saw, that the struggle is the pattern. In the physics of textile structural engineering, the tensile strength of a fabric is not determined by the individual threads, but by the friction created where they cross. A single thread of cotton is easily broken. 1,000 threads woven tightly together can stop a blade. Elena's observation of tension as the governing force of the workshop mirrors a fundamental physical reality. Without the resistance of the weave, there is no structure. The bright ones she describes appear to be managing what physicists call the entanglement of the system. If the tension is lost, the information within the system, what Elena calls the garment of life, collapses into entropy. The struggle she witnesses is not a moral metaphor. It is a description of the energy required to maintain the integrity of a human identity against the forces of decay. My mother, Abuela Rosa, came back to my side. She took my arm and her grip was strong, like it used to be when she was teaching me how to guide the fabric under the foot of the old singer. She pointed to the looms. "Look at the thickness, Elena. Look at the weave." I looked. On Earth, we talk about getting older like it's a subtraction. We say, "I can't walk as fast. I can't remember the names. My skin is getting thin." We think we are becoming less. But from this side, it was exactly the opposite. I saw a young woman arrive in the workshop. She was maybe 20. Her garment was beautiful, yes, but it was thin, like a piece of cheap gauze. You could see right through it. There was no weight to it, no history. It was a single layer of thread. Then I looked at my mother. Her garment was thick. It was dense. It had the weight of 89 years of Florida humidity and 3 children and a husband who died too young and 1,000 Sunday dinners. It wasn't old in the way we mean. It was reinforced. The wrinkles I saw on her face back in the nursing home, here they weren't marks of loss. They were the places where the bright ones had added extra thread to keep the fabric from tearing under the pressure of her grief. Age is accumulation, she told me. She said that every time we survive a night where we didn't think we could get up the next morning, a new layer is added to the weave. Every time we love someone who is hard to love, the thread is doubled. By the time you are 70 or 80 or 90, you aren't a worn out piece of cloth. You are a masterpiece of density. You are the strongest thing in the room. I felt so stupid. All those years I spent buying expensive creams to hide the lines around my eyes. I was trying to rub away the most valuable part of my work. I looked at the shadow stitchers again. I realized why they hate the old ones so much. They hate the density. They can't pull the threads out of a weave that is that tight. They can only get to the young ones, or the ones who have given up. They want us to stay thin. They want us to believe that our lives are only valuable when the fabric is new and unwrinkled, because a thin life is easy to tear. But a life that has been mended 1,000 times? You can't break that. Even death can't break that. The concept of aging as accumulation rather than decline finds a striking parallel in the research of Dr. Gene Cohen, founding director of the Center on Aging, Health and Humanities at George Washington University. Cohen's work on developmental intelligence suggests that the aging brain actually enters a phase of synthesis, where it begins to weave together disparate life experiences into a new kind of cognitive density. This thickening of the weave, as Elena calls it, correlates with the documented neurological shift toward using both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously to solve problems, a process called bilateralization. While the outside of the brain may show signs of physical atrophy, the inside is becoming structurally more complex and resilient, matching Elena's observation of the density of the older souls she encountered. I turned back to the master. He was still standing by the table with the album. I was thinking about my daughter, Luz. She's 24. She worries about everything. She looks in the mirror and she sees a pimple or a stray hair and she thinks the world is ending. I wanted to tell her, Luz, stop. You're just starting the first row. Don't be afraid of the knots. But I couldn't reach her. The master looked at me, and I felt like he was reading the labels on the back of my soul. He knew I was thinking about the unfinished work. He picked up the family album, the one we were looking at in the living room. On Earth, that album is just paper and plastic. It's a mess of old receipts and blurry photos. But here, it was a record of the tension. He flipped to the page of 2019. That was the year Mateo's sister died. It was a hard year. We almost lost the house. I remember sitting at my sewing machine until 2 a.m., crying so hard I couldn't see the needle. I thought that year was a black hole, a waste. But when the master touched that page, the photo of the funeral, it changed. I saw the threads of that year. They were a deep, dark purple, the color of a bruise, but they were woven so tightly with the gold threads of Mateo's strength and the green threads of the neighbors who brought us food. He said, not with a voice, but with a vibration that shook my bones. Nothing is lost in the weave, Elena, not a single tear, not a single hour of work. I looked at my hands again. The stains from the shadows were gone. My calluses, the ones I was so ashamed of, they were glowing. They looked like thimbles made of pearl. He was showing me that my labor, the thousands of hems I had sewn for strangers, the zippers I had fixed for $5, the way I had kept my family's clothes together, it wasn't just a job. It was part of the maintenance of the world. Every time I fixed a tear for a neighbor, I was helping the bright ones hold the tension. I was a subcontractor for the workshop. But I'm tired, I said. I felt the weight of my 58 years suddenly. I don't know if I can keep pulling the thread. He didn't say it would be easy. He didn't promise that the fabric wouldn't get heavy. He just pointed to the blank page again, the one with the blue thread. The garment is for the wedding, he said. I didn't understand. What wedding? Luz isn't even dating anyone serious. He smiled, and the room, the infinite workshop, it started to vibrate. The sound was like 1,000 industrial sewing machines all running at once, a massive rhythmic hum that felt like it was going to shake me apart. The shadow stitchers screamed. They hated the sound. It was the sound of creation. It was the sound of the weave being tightened. Elena's description of shadow stitchers and bright ones creates a sharp theological friction regarding the nature of spiritual conflict during a near-death experience. Traditional Western theological perspectives often frame the afterlife as a place of immediate resolution, a peace that surpasses understanding where conflict ceases. However, Elena describes a continuing struggle, a workshop where tension must be maintained and shadows must be resisted even in the presence of the master. One perspective suggests that these shadows are external adversarial forces, traditional demons, attempting to claim the soul by exploiting its regrets. An opposing perspective, rooted in the life review research of Raymond Moody, suggests these entities are projections of the soul's own unresolved shame, a psychological unraveling that the individual must overcome to achieve wholeness. The tension remains. Is the workshop a place of rest, or is it a place where the work of being human reaches its most critical intensity? The hum got louder. I felt the floor under my feet, which wasn't really a floor, but a stretch of white linen, start to pull. I looked at my mother one last time. She was standing with the bright ones now. She was leaning her weight against a thread that was so bright it made my eyes water. Go back, Elena, she said. The hem isn't finished. You have to tell them about the density. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in the cedar-smelling air. I wanted to be in the place where my wrinkles were marks of honor. But the blue thread, the one on the blank page, it suddenly leaped out of the album. It wrapped itself around my wrist like a bracelet. It was cold, so cold it felt like ice. I looked at the master. Will I remember? I asked. He reached out and closed the album. The sound of the cover hitting the pages was like a clap of thunder. You will feel the tension, he said. And then the workshop wasn't a room anymore. It was a blur of motion. I felt myself being pulled backward through the layers of the fabric, through the knots and the raw edges, down, back toward the underside, where everything is messy and dark. I saw the living room again. But it was weird. It was like looking at a photograph that hasn't been developed yet. Everything was gray. I saw Mateo. He was on his knees. He was screaming my name, but I couldn't hear the sound. I could only see the vibration of his throat. I saw Luz. She was on her phone, her hands shaking so hard she dropped it. I wanted to reach out and tell them, "It's okay, it's just a stitch. We're just adding a layer." But my body, my 58-year-old, tired, broken-hearted body, it was sitting on that sofa like a discarded coat. It looked small. It looked empty. I felt a sudden, violent shove, like being pushed through a door that's too narrow for your shoulders. The gray world turned into an explosion of pain. In the 15th century, the Aztec civilization of central Mexico practiced a ritualized form of weaving that they believed maintained the tlalpilli, the sacred bundles of time and fate. The weavers, often older women, were referred to as the keepers of the tension. They believed that if a weaver lost her focus or the thread became loose, the sun would fail to rise and the tsitsimimi, shadow demons of the night, would descend to tear the fabric of reality. Elena's description of the shadow stitchers attacking the hems of identity and the bright ones, maintaining the cosmic tension, mirrors this ancient Mesoamerican understanding of existence as a literal textile construction. In 1454, during a massive famine in the Valley of Mexico, records indicate that the weavers redoubled their work, believing that only the density of their prayer-woven garments could hold the world together against the encroaching dark. It was the smell that hit me first. Not cedar, not linen. It was the smell of burning plastic and metallic blood. My chest, it felt like someone had driven a truck over me. I couldn't breathe. Every time I tried to pull in air, it felt like I was swallowing needles. I heard a voice. It wasn't the master. It was loud and panicked, and it sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a deep well. "Clear! Clear again!" I felt a massive jolt of electricity. My whole body jumped off the sofa. My head hit the back of the cushions. The gray was gone. The color came back so fast it hurt. The orange of the Miami sunset coming through the blinds, the red of the spilled coffee on the white rug, the blue of Luz's shirt. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was the album. It was lying on the floor, open. The photo of my mother under the mango tree was staring at me. I tried to speak. I wanted to tell Mateo to look at the weave. I wanted to tell him that his sister was okay, that she was part of the architecture now. But I couldn't make a sound. My throat was dry. Mateo saw my eyes open. He let out a sound, not a cry, more like a growl. He grabbed my face in his hands. His hands were shaking. They were sweaty. They were so physical. "Elena! Elena, stay with me, mi amor. Stay here." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. He thought I was dying. He thought the thread had snapped for good. But I looked down at my wrist. The blue thread, the one from the workshop, it wasn't there. Not in the way you could see it, but I could feel it. It was tight, a perfect, steady tension that was pulling me back into the world. I realized then that the hospital was next. The sirens, the white lights, the long nights in the ICU where the machines would hum just like the workshop. But I wasn't afraid of getting old anymore. I wasn't afraid of the years. I looked at the wrinkles on Mateo's forehead, the deep ones that had arrived since he lost his job. I reached up, my hand moving so slowly, and I touched them. I didn't see worry. I saw strength. I saw the reinforcement. "It's thick, Mateo," I whispered. My voice sounded like gravel. "The weave, it's so thick." He didn't understand. He just cried and held me. But I knew we were just getting to the good part of the garment. I'm trying to say this right, please. I'm running out of the right words. When you're in the shop and you're working with a heavy upholstery fabric, you have to change the needle. You can't use the fine one you use for silk, it'll snap. My voice, it feels like that fine needle right now. It wasn't built to hold this. I'm 58, but I feel like I'm 150, and also like I haven't even been born yet. Wait, let me go back to the table. The master. He was holding the album, my family album with the peeling gold letters, and I realized he wasn't just looking at the pictures, he was feeling the weight of the pages. He looked at me, and I saw that he wasn't just a carpenter or a teacher, he was the one who designed the whole drape of the world. He said, "Elena, look at your hands." I looked. They were gnarled. The joints were swollen from years of repetitive motion, from the cold AC in the factory, from the way I used to grip the shears until my palms went numb. I had always hated my hands. I thought they were ugly. I thought they were the proof that life had used me up. But as he held them, the calluses, they didn't go away. They started to shine. He said, "Every mark is an achievement." I didn't understand. Achievement? I thought an achievement was a trophy or a big house or a bank account. I'm just a woman who sews hems in a bungalow in Miami. But he showed me that in the place where he lives, age is like a military rank. On Earth, we see an old woman with a walker and we see loss, we see subtraction. But from his side, he sees someone who has survived the war. He sees a veteran who has carried the weight of the weave for decades without letting the thread snap. The more you have suffered, the more you have mended, the higher your rank is there. I saw a woman pass behind him. She must have been 100 years old when she died. Her garment was so dense, so heavy with layers of endurance and love and grief, that the bright ones, the angels, they bowed to her as she walked by. Not because they felt sorry for her, because they were in awe of what she had built. She had more density than they did. They have never known what it means to have a heartbreak and then have to sew it back together while your hands are shaking. They have never known the achievement of getting old. I looked at my own life, and for the first time, I didn't see a series of things I had lost. I saw a piece of work that was almost finished. "Is it for the wedding?" I asked him again. I remembered his words from before. He leaned in close. His face was like a furnace of, I can't use the word. It was a pressure that made my joints ache with how much he cared. He said, "The wedding is when the garment is finally worn by the one it was made for. You are making yourself, Elena. Every day you choose to keep going, you are adding the thread that makes the fit perfect." I felt this shift. It wasn't in the room. It was in my chest. I realized that the shadow stitchers, those things in the corners, they weren't just trying to make me sad. They were trying to keep me from my rank. They wanted me to arrive at the wedding in a thin, ragged piece of gauze because I had been too afraid to let the years add the weight. I looked at the blank page in the album, the blue thread. "I have to go back," I said. It wasn't a question. I knew. He didn't say stay. He didn't say go. He just closed the album and handed it to me. And as my fingers touched the cover, the real cover, the one that's sitting on my nightstand right now, the workshop vanished. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General issued an advisory on the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, noting that social disconnection among the elderly carries a mortality risk equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The report highlights a societal perception of aging as a period of uselessness and diminishment. This creates a direct tension with Elena's vision of accumulation. While the physical record suggests that isolation leads to a literal thinning of the life force, Elena describes a spiritual environment where the exact opposite is expected, a thickening of the identity through the very struggles that the modern world seeks to minimize or medicate away. The density she describes is the one thing the modern medical model cannot measure, the value of a life that has been mended. The hospital, it was a nightmare of bobbins. That's how it felt. The machines, the constant whir click of the ventilators, the tubes coming out of my arms like loose threads that hadn't been tied off. I woke up 3 days later. The air didn't smell like cedar anymore. It smelled like bleach and that specific sour smell of people who are trying to stay alive. Mateo was there. He was sleeping in the chair. He looked like he had been unsewn. His shirt was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. I reached out my hand. My arm felt like it was made of lead. I touched his shoulder. He jumped. He looked at me, and for a second, he didn't know who I was. Then he let out this sound, this sob that sounded like it had been stuck in his chest for 40 years. "Elena," he whispered. "Elena, you came back." I couldn't talk yet. I had a tube in my throat, but I looked at his face. I saw the deep lines around his eyes. I saw the gray in his hair, and I didn't see a man who was getting old. I saw the master's work. I saw the achievement of him. Later, after they took the tube out, the doctor came in. Dr. Aris, a young man, very clean, very fast. He was looking at a clipboard. He said, "Mrs. Garcia, you are a miracle. Your heart was stopped for 8 minutes and 22 seconds. By all the rules, you shouldn't be speaking to me right now." He was talking about data. He was talking about oxygen deprivation. He was looking at the back of the fabric. I wanted to tell him, "Doctor, I wasn't deprived of anything. I was being reinforced." I asked for the album. Luz had brought it from the house. It was sitting on the rolling table next to the plastic cup of water. I opened it to the page where I had died, the photo of my mother. There was a smudge on the plastic now, a brown stain from where the coffee had spilled when Mateo dropped it. On Earth, it was a mess, a ruined page. But I ran my fingers over that stain, and I felt the tension. I felt the blue thread. I realized that I have a mission now, but it isn't a mission to go out and preach on a street corner. I'm a costurera. I don't give speeches. My mission is just to see. I see the women in the grocery store, the ones who apologize for being slow, the ones who hide their hands because they have liver spots. I want to grab them. I want to tell them, do you know what rank you are? Do you know that the bright ones are waiting for you to finish the hem? I haven't found a way to hold it all yet. It's too much. The weight of what I saw, it's like trying to sew a wedding dress out of lead. But every morning now, I get up and I look in the mirror. I don't look for the wrinkles to be gone. I look at them the way a builder looks at the foundation of a skyscraper. I'm 58, and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of 60. I'm not afraid of 80. I'm looking forward to the density. The formal discharge summary from Mercy Hospital, Miami, dated May 21, 2025, contains a specific notation in the morbidity and mortality section. It reads, patient suffered grade 3 cardiac arrest with prolonged downtime. Resuscitation required 3 shocks at 360 joules. Post-resuscitation EEG showed immediate return to baseline cognitive function with no signs of hypoxic encephalopathy. The record notes that the patient's recovery was atypical. However, the document fails to mention one physical detail noted by the attending nurse, Sarah V. During the first 12 hours of recovery, the patient's skin temperature remained exactly 98.6 degrees across all extremities, showing none of the typical shunting or coldness associated with post-cardiac shock. The medical language accounts for the restart of the pump, but it does not account for the immediate, uniform heat that returned to Elena's body. Mateo Garcia, speaking to a neighbor in the hospital hallway on the 4th night. She didn't just wake up. She looked at me like she was checking the seams on a suit I've been wearing my whole life. And for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for being tired. In 2024, the Global Report on Ageism by the World Health Organization identified that 1 in every 2 people worldwide holds ageist attitudes, which leads to poorer physical and mental health for older adults. Alina's vision of reverence for age stands in direct opposition to this global trend. While the world currently invests billions in anti-aging technologies, a market projected by Forbes to reach $422 billion by 2030, Elena describes a reality where the anti-aging impulse is actually an impulse toward thinning the soul. Her account suggests that the multi-billion-dollar industry is effectively funding the work of what she calls the shadow stitchers, attempting to prevent the very density that the afterlife values most. I'm back in my studio now. The sun is coming through the window, hitting the spools of thread. I'm working on a dress for a quinceañera, a girl named Sophia. She's 15. She's all nerves and thin fabric. She wants it to be perfect. She wants every stitch to be invisible. I look at her and I smile. I'm sewing the inner lining, the part no one will ever see. My hands, they still ache. The calluses are still there. But when I pull the thread through the silk, I don't just feel the resistance of the cloth. I feel the tension of the master. I think about the man I saw in the workshop, the one who was trying to unsue his life. I pray for him every night. I pray that he finally looked up and saw the master tailor. I pray he stopped pulling at the threads. I look at the family album. It's sitting on my sewing table. I don't open it much anymore. I don't need to. I know what's on the blank page. I'm just sitting here with the needle, waiting for the next color. My heart, it beats different now. It's not just a pump, it's a bobbin. And I'm going to keep sewing until the garment is ready for the wedding. I'm not afraid of the thread running out. I'm just making sure the tension is right. I'm just holding the weave. Elena stops when she tries to describe the color of the thread. Jesucristo used to touch her chest. There is a specific frequency of light, often called primary light, in NDE literature, that falls outside the human visible spectrum of 380 to 700 nanometers. Elena's sudden silence at this point in her account is not a loss of memory. It is a structural failure of language. She is attempting to describe a color that her physical eyes were never designed to see, and the absence of that word is the most honest part of her testimony. The medical record at Mercy Hospital shows that Elena Garcia was clinically dead for 8 minutes and 22 seconds. In the language of the hospital, that time is an arrest, a cessation, a void. But in the gold-lettered family album that still sits on Elena's sewing table in Little Havana, that time isn't a hole in the record. It's a reinforcement. The tension she describes, the density of a life well lived, is something that cannot be measured by a heart monitor or a blood pressure cuff. It is a measurement of what remains when the fabric is tested. If you go to Southwest 14th Avenue today, you might see her. A woman of 58 with hands that have been pierced 1,000 times, sitting in the orange light of the Miami sun. She isn't looking for a way to stay young. She is looking at the underside of the world, and she is finding that the knots are exactly where they are supposed to be. The album is closed now, but the weave is holding, and for Elena, that is achievement enough.